Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Sunday Night Live for 2024, right here at JonnyLipshamStudios.co.uk, here in the southeast corner of Scotland. And of course, everybody knows by now that Scotland is, of course, the centre of everything. You know, the universe, galaxy, the whole thing. Scotland was there at the beginning of the Big Bang, and then kind of through a series of incredible miracles, you know, kind of the Earth was formed with Scotland at the centre of it. So there you go. It's just going to get more and more ridiculous, this little thing that I do. But if you guys enjoy the humour of it, then I'll keep doing it, I guess. Anyway, I hope everybody is doing well and has had a fantastic Christmas and New Year's period, and I hope that many of you were able to catch my Hogmanay show, which was like 2 hours long. It was awesome. It was a lot of fun, and yes, I had quite a lot to drink. If you may recall, I had been through like a bottle of champagne, and I was drinking beers as well. So yes, my God, that's a great way to start a sentence. My speech may have been somewhat slurred. Kind of a little bit like just then, except I've only had the one glass of wine with my dinner. That's all I've had. So, but there we go. This leech was spurred, should we say, on the Hogmanay show. But yeah, it was great fun. So if you've not had a chance to go watch that, then please feel free to do so. And we had the first Songwriting Simplified show of the year on Wednesday, which was great. It was a lot of fun to do that as well. And like I said on Wednesday, we've got a lot of very, very cool things planned for 2024 for both Sunday Night Live and Songwriting Simplified. So it's going to be pretty cool. We've got some pretty awesome people who are going to be joining me on the show, on both shows, actually. And hopefully I can get some more people lined up as well. And we'll, of course, on the Sunday show right here on Sunday Night Live, we'll be tackling your Studio One questions, and we will be going over anything that is new that comes out for Studio One going through the course of 2024, because there's always maintenance releases and, you know, new features get added and stuff like that. So when there is new stuff, we will, of course, take some time to review those on Sunday Night Live as well. So stay tuned for all of those when they come down the line, as they always do, because, you know, maintenance releases and all that kind of thing, they happen all the time. So yes, Kyle says, time to change your background. The holidays are over. Yes, good point. I forgot to do that. I can certainly do that right now. Hang on just a second. Let's put that one on. There we go. There we go. Let's turn that one on. I just forgot to turn it off. But yes, there we go. So that's the Christmas background put away for another year. But we will have that out again on Christmas next year. All right. So let's see. Who do we have here today for today's show? We have... we've got Billy Morgan, we've got Bobby Booth, we've got Dave from Bob's NY, we've got Dave Barcelo, we've got Don Oliver, and we've got Kyle Drajusiak, and we've got Stephen Wilson and Ron Figura. I'm pretty sure I saw his name. There we go. Yep. And I'm trying to see who was first in the door. It's not showing me who was first in the door. That's very annoying. Don't know why it's not showing that, but yeah, I don't know why I can't see who was first in the door. So I can't tell you who was first in the door, unfortunately. But we do have a question to start the show with tonight, so we will get to that. It's Dwayne's question. He has an issue with the lyrics. I think it's the lyrics display he's talking about. So we will investigate that. He's got that happening on a Mac on Mac OS Catalina. So we will check that out, and we will see if we can reproduce that on the Windows version. And if we can, then obviously I will report that tomorrow. I will make an internal ticket with the developers tomorrow if we can reproduce it. If not, then I guess, it would be time to start troubleshooting why that happened in your particular case. It might be that you just need to uninstall and reinstall Studio One, and then, see if you can create a new song and see if you can reproduce the issue in a new song. That's always the best way to go, is to start with, if I can reproduce it, then, I can log it. But if not, then the next thing to do is to troubleshoot it and see if we can figure out if it's happening in a new song. Does it still happen? Does it still happen if you uninstall Studio One and then reinstall it, create a new song, use the lyrics display thing, and see if it happens then. If it still does happen, then I would say make a support ticket, and the support team will take a bit more of a deeper dive for you than I can do on this show. I mean, we can do a little bit, but we can't really do a whole lot because of time constraints, and also I want to be able to get to as many people's questions as possible in this show. So you guys are being hilarious with song titles. Dave Barcelow says, "Hey you, get off my lawn. That's the next record title. Everyone like it?" That's funny. I was gonna suggest one that's just like "Get Out of My Pub." That would be a good one for a songwriter from Glasgow, or you've got your song set in Glasgow or something like that. "Get Out of My Pub" is probably a frequently heard thing that happens on a Friday night if somebody gets a little bit drunken and disorderly and maybe tries to start a bar fight. I've seen a few of those in my time. And yes, you will hear the landlord shout at the top of their lungs, "Get out my pub." So, yep, get off my lawn, get out my pub. I like it. Ron Figueroa says, "I'm writing one called Angioplasty." Angiogram is another good one. If you're looking for puntastic songs. Oh, there we go. Kyle says, "I think it was Tony Stringer in first." Cool. All right. Well done, Tony, because I think that was your first time that you were first in the door. So congratulations to you. Dave says, "Greets, and no clue why I fell into this portal once again." See, it's because this show is pretty much the center of YouTube. So whenever I start it, anybody that has any kind of desire for music and songwriting and composing and mixing and things, you kind of tend to gravitate to it. There's a gravitational pull towards this show, and I guess that's why you fell in, Dave. But I'm glad you're here. Let's see. And I think I'm down to the bottom of the chat already. So let's get to this issue, and we can see if it is a problem. So I need to open up a song that has some lyrics in it. That's easy enough to do, because I have a song that has lyrics in it, and it does make use of the lyrics display. So we can open that up. Let's go view lyrics display. There we go. And I can, for some reason, oh, I know why. It's because I need to just go back to the top of the song. Okay, so let's go take a look at this. So over here, there we go. There's me in the corner. And yes, I am quoting from that famous REM song. I think it is "Losing My Religion." There we go. So that's me in the corner. All right, so let's take a look at this. So I've got my Dig Myself a Hole song open here. And I think what Dwayne is saying is when he uses the pencil tool, he's getting a spinning wheel when I click the pencil in the lyric window. MacBook Catalina 10.15.7 Studio One 6.5.1. I have to force quit. So I think we can see here it is not presenting a problem for me. So I think we are good. So yes, I don't know why that might be happening for you, but it is not happening for me. So I cannot reproduce the crash. So it's certainly not happening on a PC. So that's definitely one thing for sure. So it does not appear to be a global thing for Studio One across the platforms. So it might just be that it is something to do with Catalina, or it might be something else. It could be disk reading. It could be something has just for whatever reason, a plugin has become unresponsive, and that makes Studio One go unresponsive because Studio One is waiting for something to happen, and that something isn't happening, so that's why you're ending up with a spinning wheel. So it might be worth, if your computer has not been rebooted for a while, it might be worth doing that. Just basically shut your computer completely down and then power it up again from cold. That might be worth checking out and seeing if that also helps. So I would do that first. I would do a complete shutdown of your computer, leave it for a minute or two, power it back up again, and then open that affected song and then see if the issue is reproducible. If you can reproduce the issue, then the next step I would suggest is, okay, let's uninstall and reinstall Studio One. So once Studio One is reinstalled, you can open the affected song, see if it still happens. If it still happens, that's okay. Then the next trick to do is create a new song and see if you can reproduce the issue in a new song. It could be that the issue is specific to that particular song. If that's the case, that's okay too, because if you are on Studio One Professional, then there is the import song data, which you can use to basically rescue your song. It might be that there is something corrupt inside your song. Possible. And so what you can do is you can use the import song data to import all of the song data into a new song, basically. Caveat with that is bus channels are not currently included with the import song data. What's the way around that? The way around that is you basically create an automation lane for each of those bus channels that you've got. So if you go and right click on the fader of each of your bus channels and do edit automation and then save your song. Once you've done that and you've created automation lanes in the arranger view for all of your bus channels and all of your parallel bus channels, however many bus channels you're using, and VCAs and AUXs and all of that, then what you can do then is you can then save the song and then you can use the import song data and you just basically select everything and you check all the boxes. And then you import the whole thing into a new song and your bus channels should be preserved. That's the only kind of little, that's the only little thing that there is at the moment, is that bus channels are not included in the import song data. There is a feature request for that to be added. Hasn't been yet. Who knows? They may get to it at some point. We'll see. But certainly I would love to see bus channels, VCA channels, and AUX channels, and all of those included in the import song data. That would be fantastic. But currently that is not a thing yet. We'll see. If enough people vote up that feature request, then it may yet happen. But Dwayne, that would be my advice to you to start off with. And I'm scrolling down to see if we've got anything else. Elusive 1970 is here. I think you're new to my show. So there are a couple of things that you need to do if you want to post a question. And it's okay. I will take your question as it is just now. But if you type, I should have said this at the start of the show. Old habits. I'm just kind of out the habit a little bit. If you want to ask a question, please start by typing the @ sign and then start typing Jonny Lipsham Studios, and then my channel name will come up, and then you can just click on it and it will autofill with Jonny Lipsham Studios. Then type your question. What that does is that highlights my name in red in the chat. You guys don't see it, I see it. And what that does is that means I can separate out questions from all the rest of the just general chat that's going on in the comments, okay? And that helps me to not miss questions. Dave says, a vortex-related gravitational pullation. Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what it is. You've totally nailed it. So, to your question, Elusive 1970. Welcome to the channel, by the way. Thank you for being a subscriber. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it a lot. And hopefully I can help you out here. He says, or she says, let's see, have you heard of people having a bugger of a time connecting a digital interface to Studio One? Depends on the digital interface and what you mean by digital interface. Are you talking like a keyboard controller, a Win controller, like an iWii, Or are you talking just an ordinary interface like a PreSonus audio box or the Studio 1824C or a Focusrite interface or something like that? If you're talking about interfaces, that's kind of a bit different than a keyboard controller like one of these guys or a Wind controller like the Iwi, which I do have, by the way. It's up on the shelf up there. It doesn't come out very often because that version of the Iwi I have just now does not work with Studio One currently. It's basically because the firmware I have for that is out of date and I just haven't been bothered my butt to update it yet, but I will do. So if you were to give me a wee bit more information about what device it is you're trying to connect to Studio One, then I can help you. If it's an audio box, there we go. PreSonus audio box, Behringer. Okay, okay, Behringer is not PreSonus, by the way, but that's okay. So if you're talking about an audio interface, then there's a couple of ways you can check it. You can go to Studio One Options, Audio Setup, and Audio Device. You click on this guy over here. Then here's the option for Audio Device. Studio USB, that basically means any of the Studio Series interfaces by PreSonus, which is what I've got. But if you click on this down arrow, this will show you any audio interface for which your computer has an installed driver for. So if you're using the audio box, you need to have, well, and this goes for any PreSonus device, you need to have a piece of software from PreSonus called Universal Control. You need to install that. You can get that directly from the PreSonus website. Once you have got that from the PreSonus website and you've downloaded it, you've installed it, then your audio device, being the audio box, it will see Universal Control. Universal Control will see the device, and then you should get this pretty picture in this drop-down list here, and you should find that it's available to you. But if you have not installed Universal Control, that is why Studio One is not seeing it. Okay, it needs Universal Control in order to run, because Universal Control is the device driver for it. And as Kyle points out as well, he says if you're on Windows, you can only use one interface at a time. That is correct. You only see audio device in this menu here. If you're on a Mac, you will be able to use two audio devices, one for recording and one for playback. Why is that the case? That is simply because of how audio is done on the two platforms. So it's very different on Windows from it is on PC. It's very different from how it is on Windows to how it is on a Mac, because they both basically designed their own audio protocols, and they're very different. So on a Mac, you can use two interfaces. On a PC, you cannot. And that is a Windows thing or a Mac thing. It is not a Studio One thing. It's just the way audio runs on those two platforms. All right, so I hope that helps you there. Lisa says, I listed several because I've worked with a few over the past 2 years. Okay, so if you are having issues with multiple different devices, so either the audio box or the Behringer, make sure you have installed, first of all, the device driver for both of those. So in the case of Studio One, in the case of the audio box rather, it's going to be Universal Control. You've got to have Universal Control installed. Once you've got that installed, then Studio One should see it. Likewise, for the Behringer, there should be a specific device driver that you can get from the Behringer website. And once you've got that installed, again, Studio One will see the device driver, and that will allow it to see the device. Okay? Device drivers are really important for audio interfaces. There are some that are completely class compliant, and they don't actually have an ASIO driver for them. There are some devices out there that they just don't have an ASIO driver, and they're class compliant. What that means is they will work using Windows Audio rather than having their own ASIO driver. What's the difference here? ASIO is a specific protocol that allows the device, so the audio box, and the DAW, Studio One, to work together in symbiotic partnership, and it allows them to work together very, very quickly on a very specific protocol. Okay? Whereas if the audio interface is class compliant, it doesn't have any of that. So it just uses the Windows audio driver, which is built into Windows, or I'm sure there's an equivalent for Mac. I just can't think what it is right now. And so it doesn't have the extra speed that you would get. So with something that's class compliant, you're going to get more latency, and there will be a control panel, but it's much harder to work. It's much harder to get the latency values down. I used to have, in fact, it's still on my shelf back there, but I have the, what the hell is the name of that thing? I have an interface called the IO2. I forget who makes that now. But I had that for a long time, and it's class compliant. There's no ASIO driver for it. It's long since discontinued now, but I used to use that with Studio One way back when I first started with version 2, and this is before I got a PreSonus audio interface. And it was class compliant, so there was no device driver for it. What I found, excuse me, what I found was that if I used on a Windows machine, if I used something called ASIO for All, that's a free virtual ASIO driver. And once I installed that, that sped things up quite a bit. And it meant that latency gap was much closer to where I'd want it to be. And I used it that way for quite a while. And then I got the AudioBox USB and universal control, and pretty much all of my latency issues just disappeared. They just went away. And I moved from Windows 7 to Windows 10, but I was on Windows 7 for a long time, almost until they discontinued it. And then I moved to Windows 10, and everything was even better after moving to Windows 10. So a lot of my latency issues kind of went away with swapping over to the PreSonus audio box. And then again, things got even better when I went to Windows 10 and a slightly faster machine. So what I have now is I have the Studio 1824C PreSonus audio interface, and my latency see are super low. It's almost zero latency. It's like 4 or 5 milliseconds. And the human ear cannot detect really, unless you are one of those extremely rare people who is extremely super sensitive. The human ear doesn't respond to latency latency of less than 10 milliseconds. There are some people that can, but most people don't. And certainly nobody can respond. No human being on the planet can respond to latency lower than 5 milliseconds. That's just something that doesn't happen. The reason being is that the human brain does not work fast enough. It takes a little bit of time for the sound to come from the speakers to your ears, for your brain to interpret that information and detect how fast things are or how slow things are, and then to tell your fingers what to do on a keyboard or on a electric drum set or whatever it is you're playing, or a guitar or whatever it is you're playing. So that takes much longer than 10 milliseconds to happen. So yeah, most people don't respond to anything. They don't hear anything below 5 milliseconds. Anything below 5 milliseconds is pretty much instant to the human. To the computer, it might be 4 milliseconds, but to the human being, you're not gonna notice it. You're just not, because the human ear just does not operate fast enough. There you go. Ron says Mac OS is class compliant, no drivers, MIDI and audio. There you go. That's the answer there. Let's see. Dave Barcelow says, can you install a second audio card to get two? No, you can't. Not on a Windows machine. You cannot. You can have multiple audio devices, but you can't run them in Studio One at the same time. Okay. For a long time, for making videos, I had two interfaces. I had the AudioBox USB and the IO2. And the IO2 was used for the screen capture recording, the screen capture software that I was using for making videos at the time, which was Camtasia. And so the audio, basically I connected the outputs from my monitor station, because the monitor station has several outputs. So I could output to my speakers and output to a second interface as well. So that's what I did. I had a pair of cables going from the outputs of my monitor station into the inputs of my IO2, and then that meant that Camtasia could pick up the feed of the sound of Studio One. Because basically it's a workaround, because essentially because of ASIO, Studio One has to use exclusively your audio interface on a PC. On a Mac, it's different, but on a PC, that's what happens. It takes over the whole device. Basically, no other program can use your audio interface on a PC. So Camtasia wouldn't pick up the sound of Studio One. It would only pick up my voice. It would not pick up Studio One at all. So that was the workaround. Use my second interface, plug a pair of outputs into the IO2, and then in Camtasia, in the sound settings, I just set the microphone to be the IO2. And that way it picked up everything. It picked up my voice, it picked up Studio One, and I was able to make videos with no trouble. Jonny Guide does it that way round, by the way. When he makes his videos, I mean, he uses OBS for making his videos, but it's the same thing. Two interfaces. But the difference now for me is I'm only using one interface. I'm using the Studio 1824C, which has a loop back built into it, which basically means I can loop the main outputs inside the interface back into a set of virtual inputs called Virtual 1 and 2. And then when that happens, I have OBS set to listen to the virtual inputs. And that's how you're able to hear my theme tune music, which I was playing directly out of Studio One earlier at the start of the show. And, you know, if I play this song, it works that way as well. All right, so you're hearing that because the audio from Studio One is going into the virtual input in OBS. That's how you guys are hearing it. But it doesn't work that way otherwise. If you have an interface that doesn't support loopback, then you have to have the second interface to make it work. But no, you cannot have a second interface to basically extend your outputs unless you have an interface such as the Quantum, which, by the way, only works on a Mac, or works on a PC that's got a Thunderbolt connection. You can daisy chain two Quantums together via ADAT. You can do that. You can do that in Studio One. You can do that on both of those devices. But otherwise, other than those exceptions, if you have a Behringer interface or a Focusrite interface and a PreSonus interface, you can't use the two together to kind of make more inputs. It doesn't work like that on a PC. On a Mac, you might be able to do it, but I don't think so. Let's see. Lisa 97 says, the Behringer I traded in because it was such a pain in the butt. I currently don't have any audio interface. I wanted to ask the question before looking at another one. Okay, that's cool. Yes. So if you are wanting to use the AudioBox USB, I had one for 10 years, almost 10 years. I think I had it like for 8.5 years. And it worked perfectly in Studio One. Why? It's a PreSonus interface. PreSonus interfaces are designed to work in tight integration with Studio One. So that's by design, and that's why you need universal control. Once you've got universal control installed and you've got your interface directly connected to your computer, don't plug it into one of those USB hubs because it won't work. It needs to be directly connected to the computer. So if you've got a USB port that's available on your computer, plug it in directly. Don't connect it to a hub because it won't work. And Studio One will either not see it at all, or it will keep on dropping off, and Studio One will see it for a bit and then not see it for a bit. And the reason why it does that is because those little hubs that you get for plugging in multiple devices, they have this thing where they have a built-in kind of hibernate mode. And so if it decides that an audio interface is not in use, it will just drop it off. It will put it into hibernate mode. That's not good for when you're using a DAW, because that can actually crash your DAW for a start. And the second thing is you won't be able to pass audio anymore, and you'll have to like unplug it, replug it to get it to wake it up. So that's that issue. So make sure you connect your interface directly to your computer. And as I said, PreSonus interfaces, they are all designed to work with the tightest possible integration with Studio One. Third-party interfaces, they're not really. They're designed to work with a bunch of different DAWs, and so some third-party interfaces like Focusrite, Motu, and a few others, sometimes they don't work particularly great with Studio One. Why? Mostly because some companies they just don't test their device drivers with Studio One. They'll test them with Pro Tools, and they'll test them with Logic, and they'll just assume if they work with those two, they'll work with everything. That's not always the case, and that's actually a little bit lazy, but there are companies out there that do that. Let's see. Neil Thompson says, here's a fun fact. The low E on a bass guitar is about a 41 hertz tone. One cycle of that frequency takes about 24 milliseconds. This makes bass interesting. Yes, it's also, I think the length of the wave of that low E, I think is about 30 feet long, if I'm not mistaken. If I've done my maths right, it's 30 feet long. So if you have an open E and you record that into Studio One, when it comes out of your speakers, the wavelength from your speakers is 30 feet long. And so if you don't have a treated room, it's going to hit the back of the room and it's going to start coming back towards you. It will just crash into the back wall and start bouncing back. And so you can end up with either too much bass in your room, or you can end up with, some cone filtering and things like that. That means you end up with parts of your room not having any bass in them at all. So, and it's actually 40 hertz if it's in tune. If your E string is correctly in tune, it should be 40. Let's see. What else do we have? Ron Figueroa says, I used Behringer X Air 18 and it was plug and play on my MacBook Pro 2015. Make sure you use a cable less than 15 feet long. Absolutely. Yeah, good question. But Ron then says, I'm currently using a PreSonus Studio Live Series 3 32R. Yep, that's a great rack mount mixer, that is. Excuse me. Neil says, if you have USB ports on your machine that are rated at different bit rates, use the fastest one for your interface. Yep, absolutely. Always turn USB Hibernate off in Windows. Yes, 100%. 100%. Let's see. Yeah, the PreSonus Revelator IO24 has a bunch of awesome features to it, like you have the onboard fat channel DSP, which is great. So you can have EQ compression on the way in, which is great, plus some reverb and some delay as well. So yeah, the Revelator interfaces are marvelous. They're fantastic, and the integration with Studio One is absolutely seamless, 100%. If you want to find out how much they are, you can try looking out for local dealers for you wherever you are in the world, or you can go to presonus.com and you can search up the interfaces there. And if you're in the United States, you can buy directly. If you're in Europe or Asia or Australasia, you will need to go to your local dealer. So if you're in Europe, there's Thomann and there's Gear for Music. Those are probably the two best places to buy Presonus gear. I'm always recommending people go to Gear for Music if they're in the UK. I have had no issues with Gear for Music for, I've used them to buy all sorts of things, including this mic stand, my new replacement mic stand for the one that broke, just in time for New Year's. So I got this from Gear for Music and it arrived next day, and it's perfect. But yes, I've bought other gear from them, and Presonus gear and gear from other manufacturers as well, and they are great. They do good prices. Sometimes you can get discounts, and if you're prepared to pay just a little bit extra, you can get next day delivery as well. But certainly for products over a certain value, they'll do free delivery. I've seen them do that before. And Chris from Rackner says you should also make sure your interface is powered on before you start Studio One. 100%. 100%. Yep, definitely. If you don't have it switched on before you start Studio One will never see it, even if you switch it on after the fact. Even if you switch it on after you've started Studio One will still not see it. So you'll have to quit out of Studio One and then restart it, and then it'll pick up the interface. Neil says yes, and because of frequency, wavelength, speed of sound, flukily car interiors are pretty much made for subwoofers and bass, naturally resonant frequencies around 50 to 60 hertz. Yes, which is why certainly the part of Edinburgh that we used to live in, there was this guy who had this souped up car. He had like the underglow under the car, and his the trunk of the car was like bass bins. It had like subs and bass bins, and he would crank up the volume so loud that pretty much every other frequency was just distorted to Hades, but the bass was incredibly loud. You could hear him coming for like 10 minutes before the car actually arrived outside our house. I dread to think what he has done to his hearing. But yeah, it's actually amazing. A friend of mine, maybe about 6 or 7 years ago, had this crackpot idea about recording a song in his car, and actually he wrote the song about recording a song in his car. So he basically took the individual parts of his drum set, put them in the car, and he recorded them one drum at a time. And he recorded his guitar in there, he recorded his bass, and he had his laptop, and he did everything. I think he did everything in GarageBand on his laptop, his MacBook Pro in his car. And then he mixed it in the car. And actually, the result is really good. And the song is hilarious. And he made like a music video out of it as well, which was just as funny. But it just goes to prove that it can be done. You can record and you can mix and you can master the song pretty much anywhere if you know what you're doing. If you have the appropriate skill set to make it work. You can make it work. He recorded everything in that car with one microphone, and it was really successful. I was just like, wow, that's a really, really good song. It's really well recorded, and some of the drum fills were really complicated, and he was having to do them one drum at a time, which was that to me was really, really, really special, and made for a unique sounding recording. But it turned out really, really great, and so you can do it. You can make a good record anywhere if you know what you're doing. If you have the appropriate skill set and experience, you can make it work. Recording in a car, recording in a tiny little closet, or wherever, you can certainly do it. But yeah. Gary Smith is here. He says, can we get videos showing how to make hip-hop and R&B in Studio One? Not on this channel you won't, because I don't do hip-hop or R&B. Those are styles of music that I pretty much know very little about. That said, I have been on some R&B records. I've played Fender Rhodes and Hammond B3 on some R&B records, but that's not the kind of music that I make. I've played on those kind of records. I've played on a couple of hip-hop records as a session player, but it's not music that I make, so you're not really going to see that content on this channel. However, there are some other channels where you will find hip-hop and R&B content for Studio One. There are a few good folks out there. There's Craftmaster Productions. That's my friend Chris. He's really, really good. He deals with a lot of that style of music. And he's a Studio One guy, and he's one of the moderators of the Persona Studio One group on Facebook. So he's a really, really great guy, Chris Sarr, and he really, really knows his stuff. I think he's even gained some awards from what he does. But yeah, he's been a Studio One guy since 2012, I think, a couple of years before I switched over from Cubase. So yeah, there are some others as well. There are actually some Personas artists out there. There's an organization called MVP Loops, and they actually make loop libraries. They are Personas artists, and they have made loops for Studio One. So you'll find a bunch of their loops actually inside Studio One. And also they are available from the Persona shop as well. And if you're a member of Studio One Plus, you've got access to pretty much the full MVP library. So you can go and download those at your heart's content. But yes, they have a bunch of videos there as well on their YouTube channel. But yeah, you won't get that kind of stuff on this channel, unfortunately. But Gary, I'm glad you're here. And hopefully you can learn some broad recording, mixing, and mastering techniques and stuff that I do here in Studio One. Plus, I also do regular overviews of new builds of Studio One when they come out. That's one of the other things I have here. So if you're wanting to check out the feature set for a version of Studio One that you don't have yet, then you will find those here. Let's say you're on Studio One 5 and you want to check out the feature set for Studio One 6, Studio One 6.2, Studio One 6.5, you will find those videos here on this channel as well, because I've got those. There is a Studio One meetup after my show. Billy, which Studio One meetup is that? And I would like to know what that one is. I could just click the link like an idiot. That would be smart, wouldn't it? Let's see. And this is the New Orleans one. This is Billy's meetup. Billy Morgan hosts this meetup, and it's right after this show. So in 15 minutes time, click that link, and that'll take you to the mypersonas.com events page for the New Orleans Studio One meetup, and that's where we'll go straight after the show. I will go there as well, and it'd be good to see as many of you as possible over there as well. They are always very, very good. There are plenty of meetups all over the United States and all over the world as well. Like after this one, coming up on that one's already been, I think. Yes, yesterday's meetup was the Nigerian meetup. But coming up after the New Orleans meetup, there's the Washington State one. That is rather late for me. That's like 8 p.m. Central Time. And then you got Massachusetts after that. And then you got Ohio on the 19th. And then Illinois on the 21st. And then Brazil. And they do their meetups in Portuguese. I don't understand a word of Portuguese, but they will also do some English as well. I've I've spoken to them, and they have translated for me whilst I've been there. And then there's the Louisiana meetup as well on the 24th. And then on the 26th of January, which is the last Friday of the month, it is the first UK studio meetup of the year. I host that one. And then we have the Canada West one on February 17th. So, and there are some gaps that will get filled up there as well. Sorry, folks, I have a bunch of phlegm. Hang on a second. Dave Barslow is directing Gary Smith to Exchange. There are no videos on Exchange, unfortunately. But there are videos on the Personas YouTube channel, some of which might cover the kind of styles that you are interested in. Man, I can't clear this. Hold on one second. And I clicked on the wrong thing. Hang on. There, I had to mute because I did not want you to hear me coughing really loudly, because I clipped, and it would have been very loud for you guys. Let's see. Delta Soundscapes is here. Hello, good to see you, my friend. Welcome to the show. Same bat time, same bat channel, Billy Morgan. Yes, it will be. It will be hosted on Zoom. So, yeah, follow the link that Billy posted up, and you should be able to get over to the show in about 10 minutes, just over. Let's see, what else do we have here? Neil Thompson says vehicle interiors just the right size and shape for 50 to 60 hertz resonance is almost as fluky as the 12 notes of equal temperament being reasonably near tuned for use in making music. Well, yeah, except I don't think it's a fluke. I think it's by design. Especially equal temperament. Now, I did, for my musicology part of my music degree, I did a lot of study on equal temperament and how that was all developed, and it's actually highly mathematical. It's really mathematical. Some of it is based out of some Pythagorean theory, and some of it is not, but it's kind of all developed out of the basic maths of harmonics and the harmonic series and harmonic overtones and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's actually a subject I have covered before. Not here though. On my Wednesday show on Songwriting Simplified, I covered it maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. Maybe it's something that I should revisit. But it's it's the development of different temperaments that have been tried out over the centuries, let's just say. And then how we eventually arrived at something broadly agreed with in the Baroque period, when Johann Sebastian Bach was kind of at his peak, was this thing called equal temperament. And it was kind of agreed in the 1640s. And to celebrate it being agreed in the 1640s and, technological developments that came out of the development of equal temperament, he wrote this thick work. It's about this thick, and it's basically 48 preludes and fugues in all 12 major and minor keys. So it covers the whole gamut of equal temperament. And it was for keyboard instruments, so you could play it on a harpsichord, you could play it on an organ, and it works beautifully. It's a beautiful piece of music. And it celebrates everything equal temperament, because there were keys that you couldn't really play in before that in various other things like just intonation, or there were other attempts at equal temperament which kind of work but kind of don't. But things like just intonation and things like that, and much older systems where basically in certain keys, the interval of a semitone is not exactly a semitone. It's like a semitone plus like an eighth of a tone. And then other keys, it's a little bit smaller than a semitone. So the semitone might be an eighth of a tone smaller. And then there are other notes where it might be an eighth of a tone or half a tone wider than a semitone. And so that affects other instruments being able to play together. And so that's one of the reasons why equal temperament was developed. It was to enable all musicians to be able to play together in all keys. Because all keys were possible, but not all keys sound good with different instruments playing together because of this issue with the interval of a semitone not being exact. And the thing is on a keyboard before equal temperament, the lower you go down the keyboard towards this end of the keyboard, the wider the interval of a semitone gets. And it's like almost a semitone and a quarter by the time you get down to the very bottom of the keyboard. Much smaller keyboard back then. It was only maybe about 5.5 octaves, maybe 6 octaves, for that very reason. Because these really low notes were just not playable because they were so horribly out of tune. And then up at the top end of the keyboard exhibited a similar problem in that the semitone was too narrow. And so you were getting into microtones going up at the other end. And so basically, if you were to chop off the bottom octave and a half of an 88 keyboard and the top octave and a half, that was the range of the piano at the time, or the harpsichord at the time. Because anything else was just, anything lower or higher than that was just unplayable. So instruments were never developed to be 88 keys until after equal temperament. So there you go. Neil says equal temperament is a compromise between nature and math. Yes, but at the same time, a lucky fluke that only 12 notes were needed to make note relationships reasonably work. Yes, and you are correct. It is a compromise because equal temperament is not perfect. You are right. It does have flaws. But it is the system that works best for most instruments, which is why, and then of course you get the whole thing of A equals 440, kind of developed a little bit later, not really ratified or agreed on until 1825, 1830, round about there, which is like right in the midst of the Romantic period where Beethoven was kind of in his later years, and you had young upstarts like Tchaikovsky and people like that were coming up in that period. And so that's when A equals 440 was kind of universally agreed, works best for all instruments to basically keep tuning good. The reason why is because when you have A equals 440, it's the most flexible for the entire harmonic series. And we're getting really into kind of math and complex things here when we talk about the harmonic series of overtones. You have a fundamental note, and then you have a whole bunch of overtones. Most people don't hear the overtones unless like if you touch your finger lightly on a guitar string and then pluck it, you will hear the overtones instead of the fundamental. And we call those harmonics. And you can do them on a bass as well. In fact, Jaco Pastorius wrote a piece called A Portrait of Tracy, I think it is, that features lots of harmonics instead of, open and fundamental notes. And so, yeah, that's kind of a whole nother thing that we could run into on a Wednesday night rather than this show. We've got 4 minutes left, folks, and then it's going to be Billy's Studio One meetup for New Orleans over on the Zoom, so we can all jump over there. That would be really cool. I will be there for a little while before I have to go to bed because I have a very busy day tomorrow coming up, so I need to be well on top of my game. So if we don't have any more questions, we may call it a night here. I'm just trying to see what the story is with the interface issue that we were talking about earlier. Just Bob says, fun show. Sorry I have to go. A great week, everybody. See you all on Wednesday. Yes, Bob, take care, my friend. Have a great rest of your... Yeah, have a great start to your week. And I'll see you on Wednesday for Songwriting Simplified. Absolutely. All right, so we will call it there, folks. We are like a couple of minutes short of the hour, but that's okay. I don't really see any kind of new questions. Billy has posted a link to the Studio One meetup for New Orleans. Click on that link. It will take you to the my.personas.com events page, and then you can click on the Zoom link that is there. The password is S1 Meetup. So when you get the little dialog box that says the password, just type in S1 Meetup. It's all lowercase, and you'll be good to go. And Billy will let you in because Billy is a good guy. He's got a heart of gold. All right, folks. So I will see you all on Wednesday for Songwriting Simplified. I'm looking forward to getting stuck into talking more about the basic building blocks that we use for songwriting. So we're going to start talking about harmony on Wednesday. So chords and that kind of thing. I've got some cool little techniques for you to try out, which I think you will like, and hopefully you'll be able to adopt them and make them your own and add them to your songwriting toolkit. That's the idea. So we'll be talking about harmony. So if you've got questions about chords, chord changes, intervallic relationship between chords, we can cover all of those kind of things on Wednesday. So get those questions kind of thought about, and you can either email them to the web address at the bottom there, jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk. Hit the contact us form, and you can send me an email with your question if you've got quite a detailed question. Otherwise, you can drop it in the chat on Wednesday on the show, and I will take live questions, just like I have done tonight, really. But if you have not subscribed, please go and do that. It's down there, I think. Hit that subscribe button, and then hit the notification bell. Select all notifications. That way you don't miss a thing, because I've got a lot of stuff, not just Sunday night, Wednesday night. I've got a lot of other stuff coming in 2024, which is going to be really cool. We've got contests coming up as well this year for you guys to get your teeth into. I'll be working with Rich Cresswell again. And like I said, I've got multiple guests coming up, and I've got some other standalone video series that are going to be coming in 2024 as well. So it's going to be busy. There's going to be a lot of stuff coming out. So make sure you've got all notifications selected so you don't miss a thing. If you like this show, please hit the thumbs up as well. I would appreciate that a lot. And otherwise, I will bid you all a very good night. And I just clicked on something I really didn't want to click on. And no, it's not porn. I just clicked on the wrong flipping song. Anyways, I will see you all over at the meetup. Good night. Studio One meetup now. Click the link.